Hi everyone, Aiden here with etrailer. Today we're going to be taking a look at and be showing you how to install this FrontRunner Slimsport roof platform on our 2021 Toyota RAV4. Now a roof platform is a great way to carry a lot of stuff with you. You can mount up tents, kayaks, bikes, really any of FrontRunner's accessories can work great with this platform system. Not to mention, this is going to be a really good look on the RAV4 in my opinion. Now it is going to be a much more permanent install and it'll replace the existing rails on the roof of your vehicle, but the result is something that's very much custom fit and solid. And all those custom fit pieces can be seen really well in the front wind fairing, which has a perfect contour to match the roof of our RAV4. The install brackets along the side here, you'll see follow the shape of our roof line really well, keeping this pretty sleek and low profile and giving us solid attachment points on the side rails of the roof. And even towards the back, it fits around our antenna perfectly fine and has plenty of clearance for our hatch here. So you're really maximizing your roof space here. This covers pretty much the entire top and still you're not sacrificing any features of your vehicle like the hatch. Now, FrontRunner makes a couple of different styles of platforms, the Slimsport that we have installed today, and the Slimline 2. The Slimline 2 is going to be a little bit different in the sense that it has much longer slats, or wider slats that is, and a side rail around the whole thing, so there's a bit of a lip. The Slimsport here is going to differ in the fact that it's completely flat, and these bars are going to be less wide. Now, where I think that's actually a really big advantage is for clamp around accessories. These are going to be much more similar in size to a standard crossbar on a regular roof rack. So if you have any rooftop accessories like a bike rack or a cargo carrier or a kayak carrier that clamps around the bars, they're probably going to work perfectly fine with this system without the need for any other adapters, which is great. But on the flip side of that, if you don't have any rooftop accessories yet, there's a wide variety of FrontRunner accessories that will channel mount into these slats using standard M8 bolts, and it's going to be a great way to build this out to your needs. The other thing is those channels are always accessible. The openings are exposed on the sides of the rack here, so we can always pretty easily slide in those bolts and mount our accessories however we see fit. From the tallest point of the roof, you're only adding about 2.5 inches of height to the roof line of your RAV4, which is great because it, like I said, it's pretty low profile, and for most garages, I think you'll be just fine for clearance. Now, when you add accessories on top of that, take some extra caution just because any rooftop accessories, they're not always going to agree with low clearance situations like garage doors or parking garages, so I always err on the side of caution there. But when it's unloaded and not in use, I think it'll be totally fine. The other thing to consider here is the weight capacity. FrontRunner doesn't list an explicit weight capacity for the platform because it's really well built and it can handle a lot. Realistically, the limiting factor here is going to be the roof of your RAV4. So check your owner's manual and see what the roof is rated to handle, and they recommend to not exceed that weight. The thing to consider though with that is the rack itself does weigh something. It's going to be about 76 pounds, so it's not super light, but for what you get, it's actually pretty good. But you do want to take that empty carrier weight away from your total capacity and not overload the roof of your vehicle. And the other thing to consider here is the installation. I know I touched on it briefly, mentioning that it's going to replace the existing rails that were on the roof of your RAV4. Removing those is actually really easy. The place where you're going to run into maybe a little bit of trouble is the fact that you have to drop the headliner down partially, and you have to enlarge one hole in the back of the roof. Now, that might sound pretty daunting at first, but I promise it's really not too bad. If anything, it's going to be just a bit time consuming, and in some places where we have to reach up above the headliner, you're just kind of going in blind because there's not a lot of room in there. But once you get going, it's really not too bad. We got this install done while filming it really in an afternoon, so it shouldn't take you too long at home not having to film a video, and we'll walk you through the whole process together now. To begin the installation, we need to remove these rails from the roof of our RAV4. This process is going to be pretty straightforward, but we'll start on the top with a trim panel tool and look for some panels. They'll just be these small rectangular cutouts located just above the back end of each door. And there's a small tab that this trim tool can reach in. You can also achieve the same result with a flathead screwdriver. But if you ever intend to reinstall these, maybe use plastic so you don't damage it, but realistically, you're probably just gonna leave this platform on, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. Just do that for both of those locations. In those slots, there's gonna be an M6 bolt. It's not the one in the middle, it's the one on the outside edge. Grab a 10mm socket, and we can get those removed on both the front and the rear. On the rear, that one's gonna be towards the rear of the cutout there, where the front one was towards the front. Now the rail can pop off. Really, the only thing holding it down now is a few plastic push clips. So what I found is best is grab it and just rotate it towards you, and eventually you'll find one of those clips that releases. Just work your way down the line, pulling up, rotating out, and lifting it away. Now, let's hold on 1 second because this one didn't happen on the other side, but you might leave behind a little plastic clip here. And if it doesn't want to come out by hand, you might have to come back through with that trim panel tool and remove it. But this isn't needed. We want this out of our way, so I'll come back with something to get that pried out. Now, this one was pretty tricky, but I found that if you can get a trim panel tool with this forked end, that's going to be the most helpful for actually getting that removed. Just check all the remaining holes to make sure no other clips got left behind. The only thing that remains on top of the roof once the rail is gone are these cleats. Right there is where we removed the M6 bolt from, so the rail clamped down to this. But this cleat needs to get removed too, and here's what it looks like from the other side that we already removed. The front and rear are a little bit different size, but the premise is the exact same. These two studs poke down through the roof and are secured underneath with some nuts. So what we need to do is peel back the headliner a bit to gain access to those and get these cleats removed. We'll head inside the vehicle next to show you how to get that dropped down. So if you look online, there's a lot of installs pretty similar to this one that tell you to drop the whole headliner, and FrontRunner's instructions even say to drop the headliner. They don't give a lot of detail there, but you really don't need to drop the whole thing. All we need to focus on is just giving ourselves enough room to work. So this visor and this handle are going to get removed, and two plastic panels are going to get popped out just a little bit to give us enough flex in that headliner to reach those nuts. The process, again, it might sound a little intimidating, but it's really not too bad. We'll start though with a T25 Torx bit on our visor. There's going to be one screw when we open it and one screw tucked back there when it's closed, so just get those both removed. Now with all this hardware, keep it safe because this will get reused. I've got a bin on the dashboard that I'm just going to set it in, and I'll put things like the visors and the handles there too. With both those screws removed, this will drop down. We can just unclip it from the other side. And as for the clip, that'll just rotate and pull out. Pretty simple. Now the handle here is a bit tricky because it's going to want to spring back up. And these covers, I don't know if I just lack a certain level of grace, but they're pretty hard to get out. You'll want to grab some pick tools if you don't have them. And then there's going to be these small tabs on the side that you can pull out on. And if you do that on both sides, you can pull that clip out. And now that's what I mean when I say I lack a certain level of grace, because I've not gotten a single one of those to pop out smoothly. They all kind of just fly out, so be careful. I mean, they're just plastic, but repeat that for the other side on all handles. Now inside, after that cap's removed, there's a small metal clip that we can use our pick tool to basically just squeeze together to remove. And you can put it back on the end there just to keep it all together. Repeat that on both sides. just like that. So we can come to this rubber trim piece with the door open now. And if you peel from the corner, you should be able to get that unseated and just peel it back quite a bit so it's out of our way. Now the two trim pieces to look at are going to be on the B pillar and the A pillar. With that rubber trim removed, it's a lot easier to just get your thumb in this gap here and gently pry out. Nothing crazy, just like that on both sides. And before you go grabbing the headliner, wash your hands. These are hard to clean, and if you've got your hands all smudged up or gross, it's gonna make a mess. So do yourself a favor now, clean them off, or maybe put on some gloves. But with all that removed, we should be able to flex this down just a little bit. And like I said, you don't need to fully remove it. I just need enough room to stick my hand up in there. And what we're trying to find is a nut on the underside of that cleat. So they're gonna line up with where those studs are. Reaching up there, I can feel one. You won't be able to see it on camera, unfortunately, but all you need to do is be able to feel it. With your hand on the nut underneath, grab yourself a 12mm socket and start to break this loose from the top. You should be able to feel the nut not really rotating, and the stud that it's attached to should be rotating. Do this by hand, it's gonna be snug. And eventually, we'll be able to unthread the nut underneath by hand. We just have to break past some thread locker. It's important to note that up top, it's not gonna feel like it's getting any looser. And that's why I recommend doing it by hand. But right here in my left hand, I can feel the nut is breaking loose. I just dropped it, but I'll try to pop it out. That's why you wanna keep a hand on it. But here we go. That's what's gonna pop out. We'll repeat that on the other side. With both nuts removed, that cleat should just pop straight out, and repeat that process on the rear. Now the rear is gonna be the exact same with the handle removal and peeling back the trim. The only different thing is there's gonna be a trim piece right here towards the back end, but again, that's much of the same. We're just gonna grab the inside lip and pull out until it releases. Then you can remove the nuts like we did. It's just the same process. Just reach up, line up your hand, and find the right location for each one, and set it to the side. And before we carry any further, now's a great time to clean off the roof because there's probably a lot of dirt and debris up there. And a clean roof is going to help with some of the later steps where we're adding silicone to some of the holes, but also I just don't want that dirt trapped up there. On the roof of the vehicle, there's going to be a number of factory holes, some of which we had our factory cleats removed from, like these two, but there's going to be 9 in total. 1 being the very first one, 9 being the very last one here. I'm going to reference them for the next few steps by number. Now, hole number 9 here, we need to drill out and enlarge. I'm going to be using a 15/32 drill bit. The instructions call for a 12mm, but this is close enough and standard if that's all you got. And we just want to, again, enlarge that hole there. So I'm just going to go at a low speed with high pressure and carefully cut through. Now you want to go back through and cover up the bare metal. We've got this stick of clear coat, but paint will work, really just anything to protect that bare metal from corrosion in the future. And I'm going to come back and also vacuum up all those metal shavings. Now in that enlarged hole, we need to add this plus nut. That's basically going to just add threads to the hole that we can bolt to whenever the platform's up there, because this very back location, there's no good way to access it from underneath like we did with pulling the headliner back here. So for that, you'll have a plus nut, an Allen head screw, and you'll need to get yourself a 4mm Allen. And it's going to be best to have one that can attach to an impact or a driver, because we essentially need to crush that plus nut. Front runner does include, though, a small tool here. It's basically just designed to apply downward pressure on the plus nut. So you'd feed the screw through it, screw would thread into that plus nut, and when that is down on the roof, you're gonna be pushing down as hard as you can with the tool while running that impact on the screw. It'll eventually thread in and draw this bottom part up, crushing this and holding it in place in that enlarged hole. You also probably want to grab yourself some silicone because that's going to prevent any water from getting in and just make sure that the hole is sealed. So I'm going to apply a pretty generous amount of silicone around the hole first before we put the plus nut in. You can always wipe away the excess if we need to, but I'd rather have more than we need than not enough and have a leak. And realistically, this is going to be covered up, so I'm not that concerned about it. Then the plus nut with the tool already in there, push down. Now, if you didn't have a 12mm drill bit like we did, or kind of like we didn't, rather, the hole's not going to be perfect, but you can kind of force it in. That's fine. And I'll keep my hand out of the way as best I can, but I have to really have it here to apply pressure down, make sure that's tightening, and run the screw down. So at this point, what I can do is loosen it back up a bit and just make sure as I pull on this, that plus nut underneath is not coming back out or shifting around with it, which means that we've successfully crushed it. I can remove the screw and the tool, leaving behind the threads that have silicone all around them. And this will eventually serve as a mounting point for us, but that's looking pretty good. You can tell it's tightened enough because the threads are all the way up to the top. If there's still a gap where those bits of threads were further down, then we know it's not crushed all the way. So that's a good way to tell if you've got it properly tightened. Now the kit's gonna have a series of these plastic push pins, and we're gonna use those to plug up some holes that aren't in use. So grab your silicone again, and we're gonna be plugging up hole number 1, 4, 5, and 8. Same process here, bit of silicone around the hole, and we'll just push that push pin down inside. Now, during this step, you're probably gonna get some silicone on your hands. That's okay. Just make sure before you touch anything like your fender liner again, or sorry, your roof liner, you go ahead and wash your hands off, but just repeat that process for the remaining holes. Next, we're going to install some spacers. We're gonna have 5 per side, and that's gonna go in line with holes number 2, 3, 6, 7, and 9. Those will be all of our mounting holes. Now, for these spacers, apply a ring of silicone around the bottom edge, just like that, and then center it over the hole and push it down. So this one's gonna go for hole number 2 for me. Try to keep my hand out of the way as best I can, but I wanna make sure this is aligned. That'll sit right there, and just repeat that process for the remaining spacers. Then I'll just top each of those spacers with another ring of silicone. Basically, any gap where water can get in, we want it to have silicone. So now you can take your mostly assembled platform aside from the front slat and grab a friend. Jake's gonna help me lift this onto the roof, and we're just gonna be very careful to not shift any of those spacers as we get it up there. The other thing is we have a set of hardware with us right now. So we've got 1 bolt and 1 washer ready to go for the rear mounting location so that everything will hold itself in. So with everything set loosely in place, here's that hardware combination I was mentioning, M6 bolt with a flat washer, and you guessed it, more silicone. So we're gonna put a little bit on the threads, and I'm gonna add a bit onto the top mounting tab here. Just again, we're trying to cover any spot where water could get in. And this is going to get threaded down into that plus nut first. Once those back two bolts are in, we can go around to the other remaining hardware locations, take the same bolt and washer, drop them down through the spacers, only these ones will be secured underneath with another flat washer and a lock nut. It's gonna be up underneath the headliner in the same place we were working before, so not a lot of room to see, but that's what you're gonna be doing. Get them all hand tight before tightening anything down fully. Now, like we mentioned, getting underneath to attach the washer and the lock nut, it's really not super easy because there's not a lot of room to work here. But the way I found was best, we've already got them installed, is just get the washer and the nut in your hand, get your hand under, or above rather, that headliner as best you can, and just get the washer and that lock nut to touch the threads and twist the bolt from above where you've got a lot more control, just to get it started. That's where I had the most success. Once all of them are mostly tightened down, I mean, they're just hand tight, we can position the rack a bit more. And really all I did for that is check the two front corners and make sure that they're spaced about the same side to side, and same for the rear. That way I make sure that the whole rack isn't skewed and it's about centered side to side, because these holes up here are slotted. But then you can take two 10mm sockets. I'm going to use this electric ratchet with an extension for the nut underneath here, and hold the bolt head up top with just another socket. So I'll peel this headliner back. I'll get it lined up as best I can and hold it from the top. Now just repeat that for all the remaining hardware. Now as you're tightening things down, don't forget the two in the back that go into the plus nuts. And when everything's tightened down, just give it a good shake. I always like to do this to make sure that nothing's loose and I didn't just bypass a piece of hardware by accident, but everything here is looking great. We can carry on to getting this last slat installed and the wind deflector. For the wind fairing, we've got Zach to help us out on the other side. Just gonna feed it across. He can grab it over there, and we can line up the slotted holes on the side with some threaded holes on these brackets on our rack. Just gonna loosely install one of those screws by hand, just so that it holds itself up. We can get our positioning up and down, install the other one, and get it fully tightened up. And then on our very last roof slat, we've got this support bracket in the middle that'll end up on the middle of our wind fairing. Zach's gonna help us out again as we feed this across the roof, just tucking that support bracket behind that wind fairing and starting one of those screws into the end of that bar. Now that support bracket we showed earlier, it's still loose, so we can line it up with the middle slat on our wind fairing, put that last screw in, and I'll just fully tighten this down while I'm here. And the last thing we need to do is just tighten down the nut on that wind fairing bracket underneath the bar. So I'll just grab a wrench and stick my hand back here so that I can actually reach it. But once that's tightened down and we're happy with the position of the wind fairing, you're good. I opted to have the wind fairing just barely touching the roof. This protective rubber strip here will make sure that it's not rubbing against the paint and having metal on metal contact. And I figured that's our best option to reduce wind noise. So with everything tightened down, we're all good here. We just need to do a few finishing touches, adding these decorative caps to the bolt heads wherever they remain exposed. So for me, the only thing that's exposed still is the main bolts going down through the roof. Put these caps on all of those, and of course, put the interior back together. At this point, you've probably got silicone on your hands somewhere, so wash them again before you start touching the headliner. But aside from that, that's all you really gotta do. But once the interior is put back together, that'll do it for our look at and installation of the FrontRunner Slimsport roof platform on our 2021 Toyota RAV4. Thanks for watching.